Nick, maybe I could ask you about Keir Starmer. He's been making a speech this afternoon. He wants to bulldoze through barriers to British success. How's he going to do that?
Well, listen, I think Keir has been setting out his stall today in advance of the King's speech. And I think what you've seen him talk about today is a real plan to give Britain its future back. Now, let me give you some specific examples of that, whether it is in terms of investment, a national wealth fund, the gigafactories that we need for the green transition to create jobs, not just in the northeast where Keir was speaking, but up and down the country. Whether it's in terms of skills, Keir's talked today about further education colleges being able to apply to become specialist technical colleges. We've heard as well about the reform of the apprenticeships levy. Let's make it a growth and skills levy so that people throughout the course of their lives can upskill. And thirdly, and this is what Keir was talking about, bulldozing through problems in our planning system that are preventing us from efficiently building the critical national infrastructure that we need, but also the housing that we need as well. And I thought we saw those messages coming through loud and clear in that speech today. We
certainly heard a lot of that similar rhetoric, and I'm sure he's building on that, if you'll excuse the expression. Certainly what he talked about in his party conference speech 3 weeks ago. You were there, of course, in Liverpool, as was I, reporting for TalkTv. And it was a very united Labour Party at that stage. I think there was barely a cigarette paper between even people like Keir Starmer and even Richard Bergen, someone like that, who's a former shadow Secretary of State under Jeremy Corbyn. But now the Labour Party is in a slightly different position, isn't it, on Israel? In fact, we have Burnley and Pendle Council, Labour councillors, saying that Keir Starmer should resign. We have a number of people saying that within the Labour Party disagreeing with him, including some frontbenchers on Gaza and the ceasefire. It seemed it was all going pretty well for Keir Starmer, but you cannot argue that the Labour Party is united on Gaza, can you, Nick Thomas-Symonds?
Well, firstly, in terms of the speech that he's made today, I doubt you'd find anyone across the Labour Party who disagreed with the message in Keir Starmer's speech today.
I agree with you, but on Gaza you're not united, are you?
Well, in terms of the position regarding Gaza, there is unity on trying to find a position where there's a cessation of hostilities and a firm commitment to a two-state solution that would mean a safe and secure Israel alongside a viable Palestine. So there is unity on those
But there's not unity on a ceasefire, and there's lots of people saying there should be a ceasefire, and Keir Starmer saying that there shouldn't be. I actually agree with Keir Starmer. I think he's right. But your party is not united.
Well, on the issue of a ceasefire, as Keir set out in the speech he gave at Chatham House earlier in the week, the problem with a ceasefire at this stage would be to leave Hamas in a position where Hamas, a terrorist organisation that committed this terrible atrocity on the 7th of October, would still have hostages, and they would still have the capacity to launch an attack like that again. And by the way, we've heard Hamas saying that that's what they would do again.
But you don't need to convince me, Nick Thomas-Symonds. I agree with everything you're saying. Why can't Keir Starmer convince people in his own party? You agree with him, but many, many hundreds of people in the Labour Party do not.
Because there are people, and I've spoken to people, whether it's, not just parliamentary colleagues, Peter, but people, members of the party, councillors, and indeed others. I've spoken to someone who visited a kibbutz only a matter of weeks ago that was then targeted by Hamas when a family that they visited was attacked. I speak to people who have family in Gaza who are extraordinarily worried, obviously, about them. So I think these lived connections that we've got mean, of course, that people take a very strong view on this. And what Keir has been doing has been listening to those opinions, then making judgments. And I think that listening he's been doing, the conversations he's been having, is a very, very important part of his leadership on this.
In terms of the march that the pro-Palestinian organisations that have been marching in London are saying will happen on the 11th of November, Rishi Sunak's perhaps, it would appear, he's suggesting thinking about banning it or doing something perhaps to the organisation themselves. Have given us a statement saying that it's actually not going to interfere with the cenotaph and what happens at the cenotaph on the 11th or the 12th. Would Labour ban that parade?
Look, I'm in favour of the right to protest, but I do support the police in protecting our cenotaphs and our Remembrance Day parades up and down the country. I'm very proud to lead them here in Torvine every year as the Member of Parliament. I was a regular attender for years and years before that as someone local here who wanted to pay their respects. They are moments when the communities come together, and gathering at the cenotaph is central to what we do to remember all those people of previous generations, indeed current generations, and indeed our veterans as well.
I'm sure lots of people will have a lot of sympathy with that, Nick, but just to be clear, Labour wouldn't ban this parade if you were in government?
Labour would be standing with the police in making absolutely sure that whether it's the cenotaph on Whitehall, which is obviously where our national act of remembrance is, or whether indeed it's cenotaphs in any other town, city or village of the country, would be protected so that people are able to come together and have that act of remembrance without being disturbed. That's the position that Labour would take in government.